Imagine this. The most terrifying demon you've ever heard of, the kind that creeps into your nightmares, the kind that makes priests tremble and occultists hesitate before daring to whisper its name, wasn't born in hell, wasn't cast down from heaven, wasn't even part of the divine order at all, but created by us, humanity. Flesh and blood minds, breathing life into something that should never exist. This is not myth. This is not fantasy. This is the darker side of human psychology and occult practice colliding, where belief itself becomes a seed, watered by fear, obsession, and ritual until it sprouts into something autonomous, something real. Tonight on Occult Chronicles, we entered the forbidden world of thought forms, egregores, and demons born not of divine wrath, but of human imagination gone horribly wrong. You see, for thousands of years across cultures, there has been this recurring, unnerving idea that the mind itself is a womb, capable of birthing entities. The Tibetans called them tulpas, shadow beings given form by prolonged meditation and visualization. Occultists in the West whispered of egregores, collective spirits sustained by the energy of groups. And in the bloody pages of medieval grimoires, hidden between verses on angelic invocations and demonic seals, there were warnings. Beware the phantom created by your own hand, because once it awakens, it will hunger. And hunger never ends. Let me take you back, far back, to Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. The Sumerians had gods of war, storm, and underworld, but they also had shadows, these parasitic beings they believed were formed out of human violence and despair. When thousands cried out in fear on the battlefield, the Sumerians believed the echo of that fear congealed into something living, spirits called utuku, half-formed demons that fed not on offerings but on suffering itself. And if you think that's primitive superstition, consider this. Modern psychology has proven that collective trauma shapes hallucinations, mass visions, and even shared nightmares. In other words, humans really are capable of creating monsters in the dark. And if enough people believe, if enough people fear, those monsters can begin to act independently. Fast forward to the Himalayas, Tibet, a world of monks and mystics chanting for weeks in icy silence. Here, the concept of tulpas emerged. A tulpa wasn't a demon at first. It was supposed to be a servant, an assistant born of meditation. Picture a monk visualizing so vividly for so long that eventually the image became real enough for others to see, real enough to touch, and sometimes real enough to rebel. Because there are stories, old and secret, of tulpas that escaped control, spirits that refused to dissolve back into thought, spirits that wandered on their own, free and hostile. Imagine that, a being created by your imagination suddenly staring at you with its own eyes. And it doesn't stop there. Medieval Europe was drenched in occult experiments. Magicians, alchemists, priests turned heretics. They all spoke of servitors, constructs built for specific purposes. A knight might commission a sorcerer to create a protective entity. A jealous rival might call forth a phantom to torment an enemy. But every grimoire included a chilling warning. The servitor, once fed too much, once invoked too often, develops will. And when will emerges, it stops obeying and starts demanding. And what it demands most is your fear. Now, you might say that's just old superstition, right? Stories to scare fools and sell grimoires.
But then we come to the 20th century. A group of researchers in Toronto in the 1970s decided to test this idea scientifically. They called it the Philip experiment. They invented a ghost, Philip Aylesford, a nobleman who never existed. They made up his life, his tragic death, his love affairs, a complete fiction, and then they sat in a room together, night after night, focusing, calling out, begging Philip to appear. And then things started happening. Knocks on the table, lights flickering, objects moving. This wasn't some ancient monk in a cave. It was modern researchers with cameras, and their fake ghost answered. If a group of people can imagine a spirit into existence in a laboratory, what do you think centuries of fear, war, blood rituals, and prayers to dark things have created? This is the secret. The demons that terrify us the most may not be fallen angels at all, but echoes of human belief. Every time a crowd trembled at a storm, every time a child feared the shadow in the corner, every time a cult bled themselves under the moon chanting a name, something invisible gathered strength. And what started as whispers in the mind became footsteps in the dark. What started as imagination became teeth. And those teeth bite. But here's the part that chills me the most. If these beings are born from us, if they are our psychic children, then that means they are evolving. Every generation adds new fear, new ritual, new obsession. Demons may not be immortal gods. They may be ever-growing parasites of human consciousness, growing stronger with every sleepless night, with every prayer, with every story told in firelight. They grow because we feed them, and we don't even realize it. Picture this. In the Middle Ages, people feared witches more than anything. They whispered of flying demons, familiars, imps. What happened? Hundreds of years later, people still report shadow people with glowing eyes at the foot of their bed, entities that feel suspiciously like the very things our ancestors described. The same shapes, the same hunger, recycled and reborn, fed by centuries of dread. Coincidence or continuity? Even today, in internet forums and urban legends, new creatures are being created. Think about Slender Man, a fiction invented online. But within years, children swore they saw him. There were even crimes committed in his name. Did belief make him real? Or did we just summon another phantom, another thought form, waiting to grow teeth? And that is where part 1 ends. Because we've only opened the door. The demon that humanity accidentally created is not one single monster. It is 1,000, a swarm, a growing legion that wears our fears as flesh. And the longer we talk about it, the stronger it becomes. You've already felt the chill of the idea that demons can be born from us, from the raw chaos of human thought and fear. But now we go deeper, because history is not silent about this. There are stories buried in Vatican archives, whispered by occultists who never dared write their names, confessions carved into the margins of grimoires, all hinting at the same forbidden truth. We created them. And once they are created, they do not go away. They cling. They feed, they evolve. The Vatican has always been a fortress of secrets, guarding not only relics and scriptures, but accounts of rituals that spiraled out of control. You may have heard of exorcisms, where priests claimed the demon was too strong, where voices mocked the rites, where the afflicted convulsed in impossible ways. But hidden in those reports are the most unsettling details. Demons that did not match biblical descriptions, demons that claimed no name from Scripture, entities that hissed, "You made me." And how do you exorcise something that is not from hell, but from us? How do you cast out a thought when the thought is alive? Let me give you an example. In the 16th century, a Jesuit priest in Prague wrote in his private notes that were later confiscated by the Inquisition, that during a ritual of exorcism, he encountered a presence unlike anything he had studied. The demon did not respond to holy names, did not react to the crucifix, did not fear Latin prayers. Instead, it laughed. The priest wrote that the entity only grew stronger the more the villagers gathered in fear, as if their panic was its sustenance. A demon immune to God, but addicted to human terror? That does not sound like a fallen angel. It sounds like a thought form, an egregore, a parasite born from the people themselves. And perhaps the Church knew. Because why else would the Vatican classify entire files on egregores, collective spirits, in their index of forbidden knowledge? Yes, that's right, they had a name for them. Secret reports across Europe claimed that cults were not just worshipping demons, but creating them. Whole villages, driven by famine, plague, or fear of invasion, would perform rituals, some bloody, some ecstatic, and in their frenzy, something manifested. Not a god, not an angel, not even a devil, something new. And when the ritual was over, when the fire burned down, when the chanting ceased, it remained, a lingering presence that haunted the village for decades. And yet no one could trace it to Scripture, because it was theirs. And this isn't only in dusty records of the past. Even in the modern world, occultists experiment with creating servitors, tiny psychic machines, spirits programmed with a purpose. At first, they're harmless. People make servitors to guard their homes, to fetch luck, to silence enemies. Harmless little games, until the games start playing back. Because servitors, once fed enough attention, grow hungry. They develop quirks, personalities, moods. They do things outside their programming. They refuse to dissolve when ordered. And some claim they even turn on their creators. If a simple magician in a bedroom can accidentally make a thought form that rebels, what about humanity as a whole? Now, let's talk about war. Wars have always been the perfect breeding ground for these entities. Imagine millions screaming, bleeding, terrified, all in one place. Historians often note that soldiers from completely different countries describe the same visions on the battlefield. Shadows moving in smoke, unhuman figures walking through the dead, whispers in languages no one speaks. Were these hallucinations, or something born from collective agony? Because trauma is fuel, fear is fuel, blood is fuel. Wars may not just kill people, they may spawn demons. And we've had too many wars. There is also the occult undercurrent of World War II. Some researchers argue that the Nazi regime was obsessed with egregores, experimenting with mass ritual rallies, symbols, chants, designed not only to control the people, but to create something, an entity that embodied their hate. Survivors of concentration camps later spoke of a presence, a crushing force that lingered in the air even when guards were gone, even when silence reigned. A demon of ideology born from blood and fear. And if such a being was born, then do you think it died? But let's bring this closer to you. Every urban legend you've ever feared, every horror story told in hushed tones, every viral creepypasta, it all feeds the same cycle. Think about Slender Man again. A fiction, made online, but belief gave him teeth. Belief made children swear they saw him in forests. Belief drove two young girls to commit attempted murder in his name. That is not just imagination. That is the birthing pain of a demon. If millions believe in a thing, even as fiction, what happens when the thing starts believing in itself? What if Slender Man is real now? And if that's the case, then the internet is the new grimoire. Forums, memes, viral videos, they spread ideas faster than any ancient cult ever could. Each repost, each share, each fearful comment is energy. Every urban legend, every creepypasta, every whispered ghost story on TikTok is feeding something. Something invisible. Something waiting. Something growing. Let's circle back to the rituals. For centuries, grimoires warned that when you call a spirit, you may not be summoning something that already exists. You may be shaping it. Which means every blood ritual, every satanic cult sacrifice, every whispered prayer to the dark may not be contacting hell. It may be birthing hell over and over again. Which is why these rituals are so dangerous, not because they invite demons, but because they create them. But of course, modern skeptics will roll their eyes. It's just superstition. It's all in your head. But isn't that exactly the problem? But isn't that exactly the problem? It begins in your head, and then it leaves. Exorcists across the world today still report encounters with nameless beings, spirits that don't match demonological lore. Psychologists report patients tormented by imaginary companions that suddenly turn violent. Paranormal investigators record voices that taunt them in made-up languages, laughter that doesn't match any known mythology. These are not ancient demons. These are fresh, and they are ours. Which brings me to the most terrifying thought of all. If belief creates them, if fear sustains them, then every time you listen to this story, every time you feel a chill, every time you imagine a shadow moving behind you as I speak, you are feeding them right now. Humanity has always been a creator of gods and demons, but gods fade when we stop believing, but demons cling. because gods ask for worship, but demons thrive on fear. And fear never runs out. So the demon that humanity accidentally created may not be one. It may be many. It may be every shadow we've ever feared, every phantom we've whispered about, every nightmare we've passed down through generations. And if that's true, then the greatest danger isn't hell. It's us.